Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. In this video, I want to share with you 5 ways you can heal abandonment wounds and start your healing journey of healing from abandonment. So before we go into the 5 ways, I want to also clarify with you what is abandonment, what are abandonment wounds, and how can abandonment wounds be showing up in your life unconsciously? Because a lot of times people get a big aha moment when they realize, wow, I actually have abandonment wounds playing out unconsciously in my life. So, what are abandonment wounds? Abandonment wounds are emotional and psychological injuries that result from the perception or experience of being abandoned, neglected, rejected by someone who is significant in your life. If you have the perception of being abandoned and neglected, or the direct experience of being abandoned, neglected, and rejected by someone who's really important to you, that's when we develop an abandonment wound. And most of us develop these abandonment wounds early on in life, and they are also accumulative. So they build up. And abandonment doesn't necessarily have to be that that you were dropped on the street by your parents and you never saw them again, or that you had alcoholic parents, or that you were physically abused, or that, that is really horrible, although it is that too. So we're not neglecting that. Abandonment wounds can stem from very traumatic experiences, but a lot of people also experience chronic abandonment even in seemingly healthy households. So there's a lot of people who come to healing circles and abandonment healing workshops, and they actually have shame of having a sense of an abandonment wound because their parents were really nice people and there weren't really that many issues in their childhood, but they still know that they have an abandonment wound because it shows up in their relationships and work. And I'll also go into how abandonment wounds show up in your life. But I just want to clarify that it's almost impossible for any human to go through life without experiencing some form of abandonment. Even when we pop out of the womb, the warm, cozy place, we're pulled out into this cold, harsh, environment with lots of lights, and it's disruptive. And then we're put on the boob, and then we get comfort, and then we're soothed, and then we're taken off again, and then we're hungry, and we're screaming, and we don't know how to have our needs met. And then we're comforted again. And then it's this on and off disconnection that happens throughout our entire childhood and into adulthood. And abandonment can happen in your home, but it can also happen as you continue to go into school. So maybe you were bullied at school and your friends left you and you were betrayed by your friends. Maybe later on in life, you wanted to apply to a college or high school and you didn't get in. Abandonment wounds can happen in all sorts of ways. So I just also want to bring it back to different forms of abandonment that happen during early childhood, because those are the most formative years. And it's those abandonment wounds that we tend to carry with us into adulthood. So if you've had a lot of abandonment wounds from early childhood, those can become very raw and prominent in your relationships as you grow up. So obviously there's, the clear, distinct, immediate abandonment. If someone leaves you, if your parents leave you, and then you have an immediate abandonment. But there's also chronic abandonment. So in the case of where maybe your parents are, totally perfectly fine people, but maybe they're very busy with work, or maybe they're just not very present with you, or maybe they're occupied with other things, then there can be a chronic abandonment of emotional abandonment. So let's say you were a child and you actually had a problem, something happened in school, and you came home and you really needed to talk about it with your parents, but none of them were there because they were working. Or maybe they came home later and you really needed to talk with them and have a hug, but they were too tired because they'd been working all day. So that is a form. And if that's happening over and over and over again, as a child, you form this internalized belief that I am not worthy of attention, I'm not worthy of care, I'm not worthy of having my needs met, because that's what children do. That becomes their reality, and then that becomes a truth for them. So that's a form of chronic abandonment. And then obviously there's the more dysfunctional chronic abandonments, where if you have an alcoholic parent or parents, then they have a primary relationship with the drug, whether it's alcohol or any other drug, instead of you. So as a child, when you're needing your mother or your father's attention, you sense that they're there, but they're not really there because they have a priority that's not you, and it's the drug. And that is felt as a child. So again, the same thing happens. We internalize these beliefs that my needs are not worthy to be met. I'm not important. I'm not good enough for attention. I'm a burden. List goes on, And then we carry these beliefs and these abandonment wounds into adulthood. So now I want to talk about how abandonment wounds can show up in your relationships and generally in your life. So in relationships, it's very common for people who have a lot of abandonment wounds to form an insecure attachment, to need to get that sense of safety from their partner. But then they can never get it because it mirrors that same sense of familiar experience as a child. And this is the funny thing with the brain. We're attracted to what's familiar. So if we were familiar and used to abandonment as a child, that's familiar as adults in our adult relationships. So the brain will seek that same familiar behavior in relationships, whether it's also romantic relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, colleagues, any kind of human relationship. The brain will seek what is familiar, even if it's dysfunctional. So you may form insecure attachments in relationships. What children do, and then we carry this into adulthood as well, is if you have caretakers who are not there for you or who were dysfunctional in their behavior or who saw you as a burden and it was hard for you to have your needs met, you would adjust your behavior in order to make them happy, because then their happiness and your caretaker's happiness made you feel safer. And that's what develops into people pleasing. So as a child, if your mom was an alcoholic, or if your dad was really angry and aggressive, or if your parents were going through some sort of stress, as a child, as naturally pure children are, the instinctual thought is if I make them happy, then they can give me the love and the attention that I need. So then they might, tend to their mom and try to give her a hug, but then maybe the mom pushes the child away, and that's a form of rejection. That bleeds into developing people-pleasing tendencies as an adult. And this is where I have another video about people-pleasing, and I highly recommend that you watch it, because a lot of times people think that they're naturally unconditionally loving and caring, but deeper down, it's coming from a unconscious programming of I need to tend to everyone else's emotions and make sure that everyone else is happy in order for me to be safe. Of course, I'm not saying any act of kindness is coming from a wound. Absolutely not. Most likely if you're watching this, you're a super empath, you have a big heart, and you genuinely care about other people. But if there's this gray zone and there's this scale where are we acting from unconditional love, where we're also made sure that we are taken care of, and where are we acting from people pleasing in order to ensure our own safety. So this is where a lot of people get surprised, where they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that I've been people pleasing this whole time. And it felt like, and I thought that it came from this place of care, but actually it was because I was scared of my own safety. I was scared of the situation, rocking the boat, and wanting to calm down the situation and the person that my safety was attached to, or that I have the perceived safety attached to a person. So insecure attachments, people pleasing, fawning, which is kind of like an offshoot of people pleasing, addictions, to calm and to numb the emotion of feeling unsafe in ourselves, lack of boundaries, having a hard time setting boundaries. It can also show up in lack of just standing up for yourself, because it feels like if I set a boundary, then I might have the risk of losing this person. Lack of self-care, lack of self-prioritization, low self-worth, low confidence. There's a lot of different ways where abandonment wounds can show up in your life. So it influences your relationship with others, it influences your relationship with yourself, and it influences your behavior and how you show up in the world. Self-sabotage is also a common side effect of having a lot of abandonment wounds, because if you're abandoned as children, we form this belief that, well, I don't matter anyways, so why bother, So it's so important to become aware of these behavioral tendencies. If you notice that you don't prioritize the things that are important for your life, if you notice that you're people-pleasing, if you notice that you're fawning, if you notice that you are seeking safety persistently through relationships and never really experiencing it, all of these tendencies that I mentioned, if you notice that any of these tendencies are showing up, then these 5 tips that I'm going to share with you are going to be super helpful. So tip number 1 is set healthy boundaries. Now, for a person who is a people pleaser and who prioritizes everyone else before themselves, can find it difficult to set boundaries, because sometimes there's a perceived idea that if I set boundaries, this person might not like me, this person might have a negative emotional response, this person might get angry, and then my sense of safety is threatened. So then that's the childhood abandonment wound that comes up again. But the thing is, we need to reprogram our experience, because most likely, as an adult, you have attracted a healthy set of people around you. And if anything, setting healthy boundaries will just show you who you can trust and who respects you. So it's really important to set healthy boundaries and to tune in with yourself first. If there's a request, or even if it's just an invitation to go to a party or whatever it is, if you notice that you feel pressured into doing something, or if you notice that there's a request that you need to respond to, check in with yourself first, always. What is it that you need in this moment? Is this something that you really want to do? Do you even have the capability of meeting this request? And if you get a no, then practice setting healthy boundaries. And setting healthy boundaries is so good to do in friendships and relationships, in the workplace, because it creates clarity and it builds trust. Boundaries can be communicated very compassionately, with logic, with practicality, with understanding, where you are simply guiding the other person to understand you. So when you are setting your boundary, whether you are explaining why or not, that's not really important. But when you are setting a boundary, it's really important that you detach yourself from their emotional response, because this is where the people pleasing would kick in. So maybe you've experienced in the past that you set a boundary, but then because of the emotional response they had, you let go of your boundary again. So it's really important that you stick to your boundaries as well and detach yourself from their emotional response. So whether they're respectful and totally get it, which you are probably going to get plenty of experiences of, because as adults, most of us, if you're in a healthy community, most people will respond respectfully to your boundary. If you get a negative response, then it's important to learn to detach yourself from their emotional response and stick to your boundary. And you don't need to over-explain yourself, but you can just repeat what your boundary is. Simply repeat what your boundary is. And that's all you need to do. Anyone's emotional response is not your responsibility, it's their choice. So practice that. And what this will begin to do, this has a magical effect on you, because this will you will notice in your heart and you will notice in yourself that there's this inner strength that starts to come back. Because when we let go of our boundaries, and when we people please, and when we do things for other people all the time, you are depleting your energy, because all of your energy and attention is going out to other people. And it's a form of self-neglect, which depletes your energy. So when you are setting a boundary and you prioritize yourself and you are prioritizing your needs, you're calling that energy back. You'll feel it in your heart. You feel this inner peace, and you feel this relief of oh, I managed to choose myself. So setting healthy boundaries is really, really important. Tip number 2 is simply having an awareness of where you are fawning, where you are people pleasing. Notice, do a little scan daily whenever you are people pleasing. Ask yourself, am I people pleasing here, or am I acting from compassion and self-love? In intimate relationships, do I repeatedly create an insecure attachment with someone, or am I able to feel secure within a relationship? At work, am I constantly overworking and depleting my energy and not really feeling like I'm being rewarded in the way that I should? Scan all areas of your life where you are giving way too much of your energy, you are people pleasing, and you're trying to make everyone else happy in order for you to stay safe. Do an assessment, and then you can see where you can start to bring your energy back, where you can start to set boundaries, and where you can start to develop that inner sense of safety within yourself. Number 3 is release the weight of shame. So it's very common to have shame coupled with abandonment wounds. It's not fun to realize, oh yeah, I have lots of abandonment wounds, or oh, I get insecure in relationships, or oh, I'm a people pleaser. It's not something that we're super proud of, although this is changing a lot in our, very loving community. It's much easier to share these things because we have a shared humanity and we all understand each other. We're starting to reach that point, luckily. But abandonment wounds often come alongside with shame, where we feel shameful of how our parents treated us, or we feel shameful about things that we experienced in the past. So we feel shameful about our lack of, ability to stand up for ourselves. So, abandonment wounds and shame thrives in silence. The more you hide it and the more you try to be perfect, instead of realizing this shame, acknowledging the abandonment wounds, it's all of your responses, the fawning, the people pleasing, the insecure attachments, are normal responses. It's your own inner being, your own inner child trying to keep you alive. So realize that what you are experiencing is normal. And if your abandonment wounds are coming up during a breakup, for example, or a loss of a loved one, oftentimes the literature doesn't acknowledge the immense pain, the immense physical pain that you can feel in your heart and in your system, and how disabled we can feel when our abandonment wounds are activated. How we feel like we can't even show up for work, how we feel like we're totally crushed by our abandonment wounds and feeling, left in a relationship or got fired from work. It can totally feel like it will absolutely destroy us. And then we feel so shameful of feeling that we're incapable of functioning again. But this is a very normal response to an abandonment wound. So it's super important to acknowledge that you are not crazy. This is a normal response. It's a shared human wound that we all experience at some point. And you can release the shame around it because there's nothing wrong with you for having these responses. So begin to release any shame and the negative inner self-talk and release the coping mechanism of perfectionism. That's often a lot of people put on as a way to hide the shame, because this hinders your ability to be the full expression of your authentic self, which is one of the most fulfilling experiences that we can have. So that's step number 3, release the shame. Step number 4 is prioritize self-care. So self-care these days are often having a hot tub, going for a massage, and all of these things are forms of self-care that are really nice. But self-care is self-love in action. And self-love in action also includes doing the things that may not be so easy to do, but that are good for you. So getting your laundry done, going to the gym, paying your bills, applying for that job if you lost a job. After a while of grief, getting back on the dating app. These are forms of self-care that may not be so easy to put into action as you're doing it, but always makes you feel better afterwards, because you're saying, I am important. These tasks are important for my life. These tasks are important for the betterment of my future. Therefore, I am going to do them. And that's also a way where you feel the strength coming back into your body again. So do self-care, do the fluffy, nice things as well that makes you feel good. But overindulging is not what's going to build the ultimate strength that you want to experience in yourself. It's also doing the actions that may not be so easy to do, but that are good for you. So prioritize doing those as well. Tip number 5 is reprogram your mind. So when we have a lot of abandonment wounds, there's a lot of subconscious reprogramming that dictates the way that we think about ourselves and the world. So you probably have noticed that most of us have this harsh inner critic that will say things like, you're not good enough, or you're not good enough for that job, or you're not good enough for that partner, or they're going to leave you, or all of this negative inner self-talk. And it's just become so normalized in society now, and also within ourselves. And it's such a slow whisper that sometimes we don't even notice it, but it's there. Pay attention to that harsh inner critic and really start to just put a stop to that. Because now your new paradigm and your new self-talk is you're going to reparent your inner child. You're going to talk to yourself as you would talk to an innocent child. You would lift yourself up. You would have self-compassion. You would say, it's okay that you're tired and sad today. That's okay. Maybe you have a rest today. Tomorrow we can, do what's important for you. And shift your negative inner self-talk to be compassionate, loving, caring. And that doesn't mean that you just sit around and do nothing every day. You become a parent that encourages you to take the actions that are good for your future. So you begin to reparent yourself. So remove as much as you possibly can the inner critic. So let's say you got fired from a job. All of these thoughts that can come in then is, oh, I don't have skills, I'm not smart enough, everyone probably hated me, or my boss didn't like my personality, or you name it. All of that negative inner self-talk will come up to justify why it happened. But in reality, none of those things may even be true. So, and also those thoughts are not helpful for you to move forward anyways. So then reframe your own thinking and say, well, this is a blessing. I get a new opportunity to start new. Maybe there's something else that I want to do. How can I nurture my feelings today if you're still grieving? How can I move forward? Where do I actually want to put my passion and effort and joy into? So start to reframe the way that you speak to yourself is super, super, super important. because then you also avoid going down the downward spirals. Of course, if there's heartbreak, if there's someone near you who passed away, if you lost your job, take the time you need to honor your feelings, because that's important to not totally dismiss. But then once you've done that, start to pick yourself up, start to have that positive inner self-talk to move you forward. And that's when the empowering journey starts, when you can practice all of these tips that I shared with you. Then all of these heartbreaking moments, the despair, the grief, the pain, actually becomes an opportunity to clean all of that out and to bring all of your energy back into your own self and become an even stronger and bigger version of yourself that's even more capable, that's even more loving towards yourself and others, that's even more skillful, that's even more able to step forward into your relationships, into the next job, into the next adventure with more power and self-confidence and abilities than you previously had. So those are it's like a fork in the road. Either you can go down into total victimhood, which we do sometimes, and that's okay. If we need to just sit in self-pity for a little bit, that happens. But then you can take the route of empowerment, where you can become stronger than you were before. And that's where I'm encouraging you to go. And if you need help with this, you can visit my website, vanessalovestorm.com. Check out the power method if you need help with any healing of abandonment wounds where it's affecting your finances, your relationships, your sense of self. I'm here to support you. And you can also do free quizzes on my website as well. So those were the 5 tips for today, and I will see you in the next video.